Take this and put it on. The day you remove it is the day you pay a price greater than death.
After Bashiru disappeared, the village of Obanji changed. The laughter that once followed Zainabu wherever she walked slowly faded. People no longer mocked her openly. Instead, they watched her carefully, fearfully. The elders gathered beneath the great Odala tree one evening, their voices low and troubled. "This cannot continue," one of them said, rubbing his grey beard. "Two men have vanished already." "But did you not see what happened before they vanished?" another elder replied. "They became rich." The men sitting around the circle fell silent because that part was true. Musa had become the richest palm wine trapper in the region before the storm took him. Bashiru had gone from a poor fisherman with torn nets to a man building the largest house in the village. Wealth had followed them like obedient dogs. Then suddenly, they were gone. No bodies, no footprints, no signs of struggle, just disappearance. Soon, the whispers in Obanji began to change shape. At first, people called Zainabu unlucky. Then, they called her cursed. But now, something far more dangerous was growing inside the hearts of men. Greed. Because if a man married Zainabu and became rich, then perhaps he could simply leave before the curse arrived. That was the thought creeping into their minds. And it did not take long before one man spoke it aloud. His name was Sulaiman. Sulaiman was a trader who traveled between villages selling cloth and salt. Unlike Bashiru, he was clever. Unlike Musa, he was cautious. And when he heard the stories about Zainabu, he did not laugh or panic. He thought. For many nights, he sat beside the fire, listening to the elders argue about curses and spirits. Then one evening, he stood up and said calmly, "I will marry her." The entire gathering gasped. Even the elders looked shocked. "Sulaiman," one of them warned, "have you lost your mind? 2 men have already vanished." Sulaiman only smiled. 2 men became rich first, and both stayed too long. The men around the fire exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Sulaiman leaned forward. "If wealth comes after marrying her, I will take the wealth," he shrugged calmly. "And before whatever takes them comes for me, I will leave." Some men nodded slowly. The plan sounded simple, dangerous, but simple. Word spread quickly through Obanji. Soon, the villagers gathered once again, not to mock Zainabu this time, but to watch her. Sulaiman walked confidently to her hut one late afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, turning the dust road gold. Zainabu was outside her hut grinding pepper. When she saw Sulaiman approaching, she paused. Men had stopped coming near her house after Bashiru vanished. But now, here one was, walking straight toward her. "Sulaiman," she said quietly, "what brings you here?" Sulaiman smiled politely. "I have come to ask for your hand in marriage." The grinding stone slipped from Zainabu's hand and hit the ground. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes searched his face carefully. "Do you not know what people say about me?" she asked softly. "I know," Sulaiman replied. "And you still wish to marry me?" "Yes." "Why?" Sulaiman hesitated just long enough to appear sincere. "Because a woman should not live alone," he said. But inside his heart, another voice whispered, "Wealth." Zainabu studied him for a long moment. She had seen that same look before. Men did not come to her anymore because they loved her. They came because they wanted something. Still, loneliness is a heavy thing, and Zainabu had carried it for many years. So, after a long silence, she nodded. "Very well," she said. The marriage was simple. No drums, no dancing, just a quiet gathering and a few witnesses. But the entire village watched closely. They were not celebrating, they were waiting to see what would happen next. And just like before, nothing happened at first. The days passed quietly. Sulaiman moved into Zainabu's hut. He treated her kindly. He spoke gently, but deep inside, his mind was busy counting time. How long before the wealth comes? The answer came sooner than he expected. Only 3 weeks after the marriage, something strange happened. A group of traders from a distant town arrived in Obanji. They were looking for someone to help them transport goods across several villages. It was dangerous work. Bandits roamed the roads. Most people refused, but Sulaiman accepted immediately. The journey that should have taken 2 weeks ended in only 5 days, and when he returned with 3 bags of silver coins. The village was stunned. Soon, more traders came looking for him, then merchants, then travelers. Within months, Sulaiman had built a thriving trading business. He owned wagons, he hired workers. His small hut became one of the largest houses in Obanji. And just like Musa, just like Bashiru, he became very rich. But unlike them, Sulaiman remembered his plan. One night, as he counted his money, he smiled to himself. Soon, he whispered, I will leave this village. He had already chosen where to go, a faraway town where nobody knew the story of Zainabu. There, he would live comfortably with his riches, and whatever curse followed her would remain in Obanji. But something strange began happening at night. At first, it was only a feeling, a coldness in the air. Then sounds, very faint sounds, footsteps outside the hut, slow, dragging. Sulaiman began waking up in the middle of the night, listening, waiting. The footsteps would stop the moment he opened the door. But one night, he heard something else, a whisper, soft, close to the wall. He froze. Return. The word drifted through the darkness like smoke. Sulaiman jumped up and opened the door. Nothing. The night was empty. But from that night forward, he no longer slept peacefully. Meanwhile, Zainabu watched him quietly. She could see the fear growing in his eyes. And every night before sleeping, she touched the silk underwear beneath her wrapper, the same one the old woman had given her long ago, the one she had been warned never to remove. Sometimes, she wondered what would happen if she did. Would the disappearances stop? Would the curse finally end? But the old woman's voice echoed inside her mind. Never remove it. Then one night, Sulaiman made his decision. He packed his silver coins into a bag. Before dawn, he planned to leave Obanji forever. But as he stepped outside the hut, the wind suddenly stopped. The night became unnaturally quiet. Then he saw something standing at the end of the path. A tall shadow, watching him, waiting. Sulaiman's heart began pounding violently. The shadow moved slowly toward him. Step, step, step. And as he drew closer, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The figure walking toward him was not human, and it was coming to collect its payment. The night around Obanji had gone unnaturally quiet, as if even the insects were afraid to make a sound. The wind that usually rustled the palm trees had stopped completely. The moon hid behind a heavy cloud. Sulaiman stood frozen outside the hut, the bag of silver coins clutched tightly in his hands. His plan had been simple. Leave before dawn. Leave before whatever had taken Musa and Bashiru could take him. But now something stood on the narrow path leading to the forest. Something tall, something dark, something that moved like a man, but not quite like a man. Sulaiman's throat tightened. Who is there? He called. No answer. The figure continued walking. Step, step, step. As it drew closer, Sulaiman noticed something strange. Its movements were slow and stiff, like a body learning how to walk again. Then the moon slipped out from behind the clouds. The pale light touched the figure's face, and Sulaiman screamed, because the face staring back at him was familiar. It was Musa, the gentle palm wine tapper who had vanished 2 years ago. But this Musa was not the man the village once knew. His skin looked dry and cracked like old clay. His eyes were pale and empty. His mouth hung slightly open, as if he had forgotten how to speak. Sulaiman stumbled backward in terror. This is impossible, he whispered. Musa took another step, then another. Behind him, more shapes began appearing from the darkness of the forest. Another figure stepped into the moonlight. This one dragged one leg behind him. His shirt was torn. His eyes were just as empty. Sulaiman's stomach twisted violently. It was Bashiru, the fisherman, the second husband. Now he stood beside Musa like a silent shadow. Sulaiman's breath came in short bursts. "Stay away from me," he shouted. But the two men continued walking slowly toward him. Step, step, step. Inside the hut, Zainabu awoke suddenly. She had heard the scream. Her heart began racing. She rushed outside just in time to see Suleiman backing away from the approaching figures. For a moment, she did not understand what she was seeing. Then the moonlight revealed their faces. Her knees almost gave way beneath her. "Musa," she whispered. "Bashiru." They stopped a few steps away. Neither man spoke. Their hollow eyes stared only at Suleiman, and suddenly Zainabu understood. The old woman's warning came rushing back into her mind. Every blessing demands a price. Her voice trembled. "Suleiman, run!" But Suleiman was already trying to run. He turned and sprinted down the path toward the village square. The bag of silver coins fell from his hands, scattering across the ground. He did not stop. He ran past the huts, past the sleeping boats, past the Udala tree where the elders gathered every evening. Behind him, the slow footsteps continued. Not running, not rushing, just walking. Because whatever they were, they knew they would catch him eventually. The villagers began waking up as Suleiman's screams echoed through the night. Doors opened, lamps lit, people stepped outside in confusion. Then they saw what was following him. Gasps filled the air. Some women began to cry. Men stepped back in fear because the two figures chasing Suleiman were men the village believed had vanished forever. Musa, Bashiru, both walking slowly, both silent, both moving like spirits wearing human bodies. Suleiman tripped and fell in the center of the village square. He scrambled backward on the ground, shaking violently. "Help me!" he shouted, but no one moved. Fear had rooted everyone to the ground. Musa stopped a few feet away from him. Bashiru stood beside him. For the first time, Musa's mouth moved. When he spoke, his voice sounded dry, like leaves rubbing together. The debt must be paid. Suleiman screamed, "I don't owe you anything." Bashiru's empty eyes stared down at him. "You took the wealth. Now the forest takes you." The two men grabbed Suleiman by the arms. He struggled wildly, but their grip was impossibly strong. They began dragging him toward the dark road that led into the forest. "No!" Suleiman cried. "Help me!" But no one moved. Fear had watched in horror because deep inside they knew something terrible. This was not the work of men. This was the work of something older, something that lived beyond the edge of the village, something that had been waiting patiently for its payment. Zainabu ran forward. "Stop!" she shouted. The two figures paused. Musa slowly turned his head towards her. For a brief moment, the emptiness in his eyes flickered, almost like the memory of the man he used to be. Zainabu's voice trembled. "What did they do to you?" Musa answered slowly. "The forest gave us wealth and took our freedom." A cold wind suddenly swept across the village. The trees near the forest began to sway. Then, from the darkness of the forest path, another figure appeared, an old woman. Her white hair flowed down her back like river foam. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. The villagers gasped. Some recognized her immediately. It was the mysterious forest woman. She walked slowly into the square, leaning on a crooked wooden staff. When she reached Zainabu, she spoke gently. "Child." Zainabu fell to her knees, and she cried. "You said it was a blessing. You never told me this would happen." The old woman sighed. "I told you the truth," she said quietly. "But humans only hear the parts they want to hear." She pointed toward the forest. "The wealth did not come from you. It came from the spirits of the forest. And spirits do not give gifts for free." The villagers listened in stunned silence. Zainabu's voice shook. "Then why give it to me?" The old woman looked around the square slowly. "At first, it was meant to reward the man who truly loved you." Her gaze softened. "The first husband, Musa. But greed entered the hearts of men." She gestured toward the path. So the spirits decided to collect their payment differently. Zainabu's tears fell freely now. "Can it be stopped?" The old woman nodded slowly. "Yes, but the price will be yours this time." Zainabu did not hesitate. "I will pay it." The old woman pointed at her waist. "Remove the silk." The villagers gasped. Zainabu's hands trembled as she untied the hidden silk underwear beneath her wrapper. The moment the cloth touched the air, the wind roared violently through the village. The ground trembled slightly. Musa and Bashiru suddenly collapsed to their knees. Their eyes cleared, their bodies shook. For the first time in years, they looked alive again. Suleiman fell unconscious on the ground. The old woman nodded. The curse is broken. Zainabu looked at Musa with tears streaming down her face. Musa! But Musa slowly shook his head. I cannot stay, he said gently. The forest already owns my ears. Bashiru nodded sadly. We must return. The two men stood up slowly and walked back toward the forest, their bodies fading into the darkness. The villagers stood frozen in silence. As the first light of dawn touched Obanji, the old woman turned to Zainabu one final time. Your beauty and your curse are gone now, she said. You are free to live your life as you choose. Then she stepped back toward the forest and vanished like mist in the morning sun. From that day forward, no man in Obanji ever spoke lightly about sudden wealth again, because they had learned something the hard way, a lesson older than the village itself. Every gift the spirits give always demands a price, and sometimes that price is far greater than any man is willing to pay. The end.